To rally or not to rally? That is the question hovering over markets at the moment. Will stocks continue the momentum we saw in November? And if they do, where should people jump in? Investors looking for opportunities may want to know about what our next guest calls 10-bagger stocks, names that multiply their share price by a factor of 10. These stocks make up only 2.7% of 16 developed market indices over the past 10 years. Here with the names of those 10-bagger stocks is Ben Laidler, eToro Global Market Strategist. Ben, so thank you so much for joining us again. Let's jump right into these stocks that we're really looking at to kind of take us off to the races.
Yeah, so I guess it's the holy grail for any investor is to find those winners and just let them run. Clearly, it's more difficult than I make it out to be. Otherwise, I'd already be on my sort of yacht somewhere. But to your point, 2.7% of global stocks have been 10 baggers over the last decade. Nearly 5%, interestingly, in the S&P 500, which is one of the better hit rates globally. And we're not throwing darts at a dartboard here. There are some common denominators to try and increase your odds. They tend to have very strong revenue growth, and therefore it helps to be in a sector like tech, which has this sort of structural growth. They tend to have started off as sort of mid-cap stocks, big enough to take advantage of the opportunity, but small enough to have that sort of growth runway over time. And I guess thirdly, and maybe most interestingly, they're already profitable and they have quite low valuations. And that really, then gets that virtuous circle going of margins then expand, investors pay more attention, they re-rate, and, then you become that sort of 10-bagger over time.
Ben, it's really interesting, even as you're rattling off some of the parameters that kind of make up this 10-bagger personification, if you will, of some of the tickers that you're looking across. They're not even all concentrated specifically in one region of the world. They're quite international here. Give us a little bit more perspective on that and what investors should be keeping tabs on about the international environment for where some of these companies play in.
Sure. So the US does well. It's full of tech names. We've all watched in awe the sort of NVIDIA story, but it's not the best. Australia has nearly twice the proportion of 10 baggers as the S&P 500. And the sector composition is completely different. It doesn't have anything to do with tech. It's all to do with mining. And a lot of these sort of lithium miners are really leading the way there, riding on the back of the EV boom. Pilbara is a stock that's up 320 times over the last decade. So double what you've made out of NVIDIA. But you've also made great money proportionally in places like Sweden, places like Germany, markets that maybe you don't instinctively look at for those, big sort of tech juggernauts, but they've actually proportionally had more 10 baggers than the US has.
And Ben, you mentioned NVIDIA. Is it too late for investors to get into that, or is that still a strong play based on these parameters that you're looking at? And where else is it? Is it AMD? I think that's one you're a fan of. But how do you balance that out?
Yes, if you look at the top 5 10 baggers in the US over the last decade, it's NVIDIA, sort of off the charts, head and shoulders above everyone else, 120 times. AMD, Tesla, 30 odd times, and then Broadcom and Cadence up sort of 20 odd times. Now, obviously, when you're that big already and you've already gone up that much, it's going to be very difficult to then repeat it again. That's why it tends to be those sort of mid caps that are growing very quickly that can keep, doing that. But it doesn't mean that you should be bearish on these stocks. I think AI has, moved from hype to reality. NVIDIA has actually become cheaper this year because the earnings revisions have just, way outpaced the stock price. So I think that's a good place to be. It just may not be another 10-bagger from here.
All right, Ben Laidler, who is the eToro Global Market Strategist. Ben, always a pleasure to kick off the session with you. Thanks so much for taking some time.